I just realized it didn't auto start. Okay, simple explanation of what's going on here. Basically, I was like, wait a minute, why isn't it live? Yeah, because it didn't auto start. Simply put, you can see like my mouse keeps disappearing in the top left. If you want to provide feedback to add to the review, this top left is going to be the section where you'll see that chat if someone wants to review other people's opinions on it. This will be available in the stream section. It's probably going to be unlisted, but it will still be in the stream playlist, so you guys can go and check it out. The goal of this is to be able to not only provide my feedback, but also provide your feedback as well. I actually started writing about 10 minutes ago and didn't realize it didn't go live. So yeah, this is about 10 minutes of like first draft writing. I will like do a dedicated video on actually recording this and doing the documentation, and if you have personal feedback, it will go into a note section I have down here. All of my reviews and stuff like that start out like this. Usually I'll have some notes beneath them, but I didn't want to bias this too much because I'm going to be writing it live on here. Skip cutscenes. You can skip them in the game. But yeah, the goal is to just be writing through this, and this is essentially the introduction. I'll probably trim this down. Basically, I cover that the Diablo 4 beta wasn't the beta in strictest sense because it's not a beta. It's an advertising scheme with a little bit of server stress test thrown in there. So that's what that's about. And it's also so they can get some fringe bug reports that their team didn't get, although Q&A at Blizzard is kind of weak for some reason, and I'm not entirely sure if they're ever going to fix that. You can kind of see that with other things. And then there's a lot of like layers that go into these. Show passive tree. There isn't a passive tree in it. There's an active tree. Basically your skill tree where you can adjust things. It's tied in with some passives on it, but it has your active skills on it. But yeah, there's a lot of layers that go into these tests, so that's going to be a little bit about that. I might cut that part out. But yeah, by this point in development, it is going to be set in stone. And then in this one, I'm covering basically that it's not even a fifth of the world, so we can only draw so many conclusions. Simply put, it's just one of those things. Okay, you had a bug. You couldn't go out of the East Tower exit from the big city? Oh, that's okay. Yeah, I had a similar bug. But I had that area issue trying to transition between two of the little snow areas. It was during our sorcerer playthrough. Oh, the whole tree? Yeah, the view of the tree was pretty tiny. I can write that on here. You had it on two different characters? Dang. I had one where it would keep shoving me back. Basically, I would walk down the path and it would shove me back up into the previous one. But yeah, I had that one coming in a little bit. And also, if you tried going to the like next act or anything like that, it would just teleport you back. But that one was intentional, and I have a feeling the bug is somewhat related to that, because the feeling I'd get transitioning areas in the like main area whenever I'd hit that bug felt much like the feel of hitting the wall as far as transitioning to the next act. It was like it was thinking I was trying to go somewhere I wasn't supposed to be, because it wasn't like a hard just here's a line. It was like slowing your character down and then shoving them back a little bit, as opposed to just a hard stop like most invisible walls. Starting with gameplay, there's a few things Diablo 4 does quite well, a handful that it struggles with long term. The combat itself fluid. You think D4 being a console game has influenced some of the features in a negative way? Yes and no. I think it's influenced some things in a positive way, and I think it's influenced other things in a negative way. Runes are planned for an expansion. They said that one in one of the reviews. It was just like, wall couldn't move past a certain spot, use town portal and tried again and it was fine. Yeah, that's a bug a few people have reported that I know of. But as far as consoleization, the limitation on the number of skills is a big one. I will actually write that one down. Make a really good quote, it'll make it into the review. Let's see. Use town portal and tried again and it was fine. Let's see. Yeah, runes are going to be coming in. I don't know how soon the expansion is, but it's going to be coming eventually. So. Let's see. And I'm hoping the homogenous feeling from Diablo 3 and Immortal does not happen here, because the characters do feel distinct, and we had access to all of their active skills except for the finishing bonuses, and those are just slightly different, and they do feel significantly different. But the skill tree, despite having a decent number of skills in it, felt very limited to me, and I'm going to probably include that down here. It didn't feel as diverse as I would hope. And yes, I'm going to be saying good and bad things about it. I'm not going to completely trash on it because it had positives. I'm not going to completely say it's great because there were a lot of flaws. And as I played more of it, I felt more flaws, especially whenever it comes to some of the odd stuff. Each skill on the barbarian felt useful. I would say after about the midpoint they did, like, the core and the basic skills really didn't feel that good. Whereas the other classes felt like they could do something with those skills. Yeah. Well, yeah, no stamina felt good. Oh, lordy. Barbarians will be PvP beasts? Yeah, with all their damage reduction effects and stuff, yes. I actually preferred his leap attacks over Whirlwind. I never could get into the rhythm on Whirlwind, but that was just me. I didn't play a lot of the Barbarian, though. I got him kind of into mid-levels. And the movement speed thing, I think they're trying to solve with the mounts. But I would love a lot more speed while moving around, at least at the start. It always feels kind of meh. I think Barb will come together more once they can actually access their class bonuses. So it's hard to judge. Both Rogue and Source had theirs. Yeah, we didn't get a good look at his because it's an Act 3 thing. Memory serves. I think it was Act 3. It was northwest portion of the map, which I think labeled itself as Act 3. Because it looks like we're going to be heading counterclockwise around the map. Well, actually, start in the Fractured Peaks, go west, and then we're either going to end up moving north or moving south. Because it takes us all the way to that coast, and there is, God, what is it called? Something guard north of us that we don't go to. For me, barbarians, I don't even really like them late game in most of their titles, so I was trying to keep an open mind with it, but the early barbarian just felt bad. And ideally, you kind of want to make a class feel its role even early on if you want to kind of build that fantasy, but all three of the classes were a little rough starting out when you had no skills. At higher levels, and whenever you start upgrading gear, he will scale fast compared to the other ones. Especially since he has so many more item slots, and I should probably note that one. But I think he's going to be the one with the most item slots in the game, so he can get more legendary effects. And with 4 weapon bases, those can actually, like, the way they work, because I was doing this with the rogue, is you don't have to have the special effect on the weapon that uses the skill. So we were using the penetrate effect, which causes it to fork off, on a dagger rather than on the bow itself, because that's just the most convenient spot to have it. So we didn't have to actually branch off into anything. It just came with the items. It was an interesting thing, but we'll see. Got rogue and source to 25 in hardcore, and you filled 3 barbs in the Hall of the Fallen Heroes. Yeah, early game's going to be a nightmare with. I just wish they'd do something about it. I'm going to turn the music down just a little bit because it was peeking out in the orange there. Okay. Yeah, HC was separate from softcore. Wish you could use a spear as a rogue. Kind of like a Amazon. That might be a thing in the future, but I don't know if they'll do it right now. Set items, I don't know if they're planned currently, but it wasn't in the beta and it's not planned for release. Didn't expect the Butcher at level 7. I didn't expect the Butcher either time I ran into him. I actually have a note down here to talk about the Butcher. I have pros and cons for the Butcher. Entire group of HC players dying against the world boss. Yeah, the world boss is kind of deceptive. He looks like one that you'd want to stay away from, but the strategy for him is get up in his ass, because the dead zone is a T shape. See, amplified weird disparity between classes, especially against bosses, since the barbarian, to a lesser extent, the sorcerer would have dodge skills. Rogue would often result in me skating around. Yeah, the Butcher was really cool in concept. I don't know about having him in random dungeons. I think having him in events would be more ideal. If that makes sense. I would like more equipment smoothing. There's a whole... I'm about to get into the level and scaling writing part. But I have several spiels about leveling and scaling, and the scaling just doesn't feel good. I know that some other people were complaining about it, but it basically makes it so that you're almost penalized for leveling up unless you are right at the minimum level for a zone. I don't know if they're planning to incorporate maximum levels, but we didn't see it anywhere in the beta. Everything had a max level of 25 or higher. So everything would stay leveling up with you, so you couldn't just out-level a zone, which always felt weird to me. Other notable enemies like the Butcher show up, kind of like noteworthy things. Well, there is a little thing that mentioned in like one of the items about something hitting Sanctuary. So it sounds like there's an event that causes certain items to spawn, and that would be a better time for things like the Butcher to spawn. Remember doing Mephisto runs and just ignoring mobs? Don't want to fight minions when you're boss running? Yeah. You're like that because it's kind of like a terror zone, you mean, where areas that you wouldn't normally want to go farming because the creatures are solo level. Really like that because it's kind of like terrorism, where areas that you wouldn't normally want to go in farming because the creatures are solo level, you can like. Really like farming. Sorry. Oh, shower using voice to text. Okay. That makes sense. I was trying to comprehend it. You like that monsters level up with you because when you can find your favorite areas, not the high level area. Yes and no. I like the way Grim Dawn does it. Grim Dawn they level up with you in Grim Dawn as well. It's just that there is a minimum cap and a maximum cap. So let's say if you're level 5 and you go to a level 12 area, well, say a level 12 to 40 area, all the monsters will be level 12 because they can't go below that. If you go there whenever you're level 70, they'll still be level 40 or whatever I said the max was. I don't remember what it was. This means that you can go back there, but you will be capped out and you'll feel a lot stronger compared to them. But with currently the way Diablo 4's defense system is designed, you have a whole bunch of issues with basically, if you don't keep your gear upgrading, like if you don't keep your defense going up and your attack power going up, you're going to start feeling it really hard against enemies of your own level, and everything's going to be your own level. So you're going to have to, without a doubt, if you found a piece of gear with really good mods that you like on it, you're going to have to scrap that for something you don't want later on. Which always feels bad to me. It's like the nostalgia of that starter gear that got you past the first act boss is something that a lot of people hold on to. and is always kind of interesting to me. So, Council of Zakarum. Yeah, I skip the council usually whenever I'm doing Mephisto. Which, revisiting old classic baddies, I'm not sure how you feel about, because outside of monetization gating Immortal, it felt tacky and cheap having so many reused bosses and stuff shoved at you. Yeah, I can see that. I don't mind the Butcher. I wish he was implemented at specific kind of like events in the world. Because it does sound like there's going to be like a hell event of some sort that impacts the world, judging by some of the item descriptions. Because there's a rose that you're supposed to be able to farm during one of those events that lets you modify the stats on some of your gear. And it's only available in certain areas. Okay, let's see. Self. Repositioned without dodge skills, while rogue would often result in skating around the What's the point of having an open world if there's monster scaling? Exactly. Let's see. You can farm areas that have never been farmable before because all the monsters are too low level to drop anything. Real? Imagine the item drop statistics wise. Well, see, I don't mind the dungeons leveling with you, although I wouldn't. I think some of the story ones shouldn't. I think the actual side dungeons should. But as far as like the open world part, I don't think it should. Especially since it ends up with lower level characters being able to generally outperform higher level characters in some of these areas. It's very strange. I was running across that a bit. Critical cooldown and dodge just means everyone always has to be pressing dodge as they're traversing through the game. Yeah, I think 3 seconds is better than 5 seconds, though. 5 seconds is what it's at currently, and it feels like I kept feeling like I was just like a second off of being able to dodge that attack that the boss was giving and stuff like that. You were opposed to scaling it first as well because WoW had very poor implementation of it. I don't particularly like it here. I think there are advantages to it, but I think having limitations on it is better in the long term. Let's see. You wanted to point out D4 has the exact same problem people were having with D3. Forced cutscenes and unskippable dialogue. Escape key. You can skip the cutscenes and dialogue in D4. And you can walk past a lot of it. Should be a maximum level cap for the enemies, so they scale up to a certain extent to keep the challenge while you might be there, yeah. Oh, I've seen much worse scaling too, don't get me wrong. There's been some games that have done... Final Fantasy VIII is probably the worst example of scaling, in my opinion. I haven't checked it out yet, Carrie. No, I haven't. I wouldn't necessarily say better looking on the eyes, but D2 is probably my preferred game of the two, yes. Just from a gameplay aspect. The skills, like, the mechanics of combat in D4, and I should probably note this, I should write it down here. Oh yeah, the mechanics of Diablo 4 feel hollow. And I'm going to touch on it in this section right here where we're talking about the actual, like, scaling and stuff. But basically, there's a thing with the defense, like, as you get higher levels... Yeah, right here, actually, I already started, especially in public zones where you run across other players, as well as the scaling and how it interacts with your character's stats and enemy stats. Which runs counterintuitive at times. Simply put... I didn't mind Final Fantasy VIII overall, but I hated the leveling system in it. It infuriated me. Simply put, I just basically... It's a game that benefits the speedrunner mentality, if that makes sense. And Diablo 4, not far off of that. Although we do have minimum levels in some zones, so that does work out there. D2 has just enough screen... I don't know, I didn't feel like D4 had too much on the screen. If anything, I felt like there were too large of gaps between some groups of enemies. There was a point where we were farming those ghosts, and it felt atrocious because we were just getting 1 or 2 ghosts at a time. You will know if they listen to players when you log in and launch, press enter to chat, bottom right UI is gone. I highly doubt that'll disappear. I don't think enough people are annoyed about that one. I'm annoyed about it being always online. I would much rather have just a single player version of it without the world bosses. If you want the world bosses, hop on. Yep. I have it on a notepad on my other desktop. I'm glad I'm not, like, actively playing a game right now because my internet is acting up. Oh, and be sure to vote on that poll, by the way. That's going to determine what games we're playing on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. Because there's a few games on that list. Let's just say I've got a couple stinkers and I've got a few good ones in mind. The good ones are going to take longer than 3 days, though. So it's basically going to come down to a choice of probably 2 good games and 2 bad games. I mean, the point value and all the words, like miss all over, too many words and numbers on screen. Oh, I have a lot of that minimized in a lot of those games, but I think I left them at default for D4. Think it'd be good for looking for group feature? Yeah. They're going to eventually force you to party up to improve your survival, which is why you hated Diablo more, deal with the forced party stuff. Yeah, just let me go solo. I'm just writing your names in here just so I remember who kind of like had the rough idea. Turned off numbers and was somewhat annoyed at things like immune or dodge would still pop up. Yeah, dodge I think was me. I don't think it shows it on the enemies, but it could. Immune was irritating because most of the time it was fine, but there was one boss we fought where he had to kill the guys that were projecting onto him. And I swear to God, I couldn't see the lines because it was brown on brown. Because it was daylight out and we were in the snow area. E3 was too loud with the UI. It felt like playing an arcade game and all the loud UI announcements like, yay, I destroyed 6 objects. Hooray, serotonin. Yeah. Sadly, the more games I review, the more games I do Let's Plays and stuff of, the more cynical I get towards stuff like that. I try not to. I try to take the game for like what the average person would view it as, but the more you look at stuff like that, the more you notice it. Just like the more I notice like monetization schemes, the more I notice this feature was added just for X, Y, or Z, not for actual gameplay. I notice those a lot. It's actually kind of frustrating. But you don't really need to have pop-ups to kill 1,000 skeletons. Yeah. I would love to be able to disable those. But yeah, there's a lot of those. I ran across several of them as I was getting the second character up to 25. We got like 1,000 goat men, 1,000 this, 1,000 that. And yes, the actual streams without like the artifacting and stuff are going to be available over on the Let's Play Everything channel. This will not. And yes, I will be trimming this down. The review will probably be Wednesday, because I am actually pretty tired while writing this, so I'm probably only going to go for about half an hour. I just want to write down some things and get some thoughts on the game so I can incorporate them in. So far, we have a handful. Ranging from bugs to and immune and dodge text not being able to be turned off. View the tree was hard to do. Limitation on number of skills. Yeah, it limits your view. Yeah. I can't play hardcore online. My internet connection's not stable enough. What am I using? This is Notion. It's actually a really handy program. I actually have, because it's a nice mix of like Trello as well as a spreadsheet system. Word analogy time: D2 Bruce Lee, D3 Steven Seagal, D4 Jackie Chan. I wouldn't say D4 is quite Jackie Chan, but yeah. I would say Diablo 2 is chess, Diablo 3 is checkers, and Diablo 4 is... probably Go. Except Go is more complex. As far as strategies go. The best thing about Diablo has always been the story and the lore. I like the world building in it, yeah. And I do think Diablo 4 is doing a little bit better at that than Diablo 3, but only a little. I still think Diablo 1 did best for building the world as far as like the atmosphere. Diablo 2 kind of got the arc really flowing. Diablo 3 dropped the ball in some places, but did okay at setting the story that it wanted to tell. It just didn't feel like it was in the same atmosphere, if that makes sense. And then Diablo 4 is going back to the like, we're in a brutal world here. We should make sure it feels like it. Because it's kind of between Diablo 1 and 2 in terms of gore and stuff. I feel like I'm gonna sneeze, and I'm trying not to. Are there runes in D4? Not quite yet. Worst voted for the worst action RPG. I have two options for that, Riss. There's no butterflies in D4. Deckard would be happy. I wouldn't be surprised if there's butterflies somewhere. The only big hit you don't like of the story is that your character being forced to consume Lilith's blood and connecting you to her does your special and demons will notice you thing again. Thing I don't like about that, especially in an MMO, is because it makes it... the way they set that up, that would be a one-off event. At least with a lot of MMOs they've learned. I should probably have a story... that's going to be down here. I mean, that's what the worst action RPGs are. Let's just say some of them are reviewed like... some of them I'm not even sure I can get to run. One of them didn't even finish development. One of the two that I chose actually didn't technically finish development. They left it as just a roguelike. And they were planning to have stories and stuff. Stay a while and listen. Yeah, the Chosen One event really threw me off on this. Why is Sorceress always OP? Because magic. There's a thing with power fantasies, and they're hard to balance with each other. I think the Barbarian needs a bit more AoE on his attacks. You went into 2, you love that it was just basically a window into what would humanity go through if it was actually confronted with actual demons. And you also don't have the I'm special in either of those. Weirdly enough, the Diablo 1 and Diablo 2, you don't have the I'm special moment. Besides just you happen to be there and strong. In Diablo 3, you don't really have an I'm special there either. You have a What's-Her-Face's special, but you don't have an I'm special. Diablo 4 has an I'm special. Because you have an unrepeatable event. Yeah, he'll pop up somewhere. Watch him be a random boss, like, just in hell. Just randomly pops up like the Butcher. Just making Lilith the headliner of Diablo. If 30,000 people are drinking 1 cup worth of Lilith's blood, Blizzard would need to provide several tanker trucks of Lilith's blood for all the players. Exactly. See, 30,000 cups into gallons. Yeah. It's a bit ridiculous. And I think if best wins, we're probably going to do Torchlight 1. If worst wins, we're probably going to do either... You guys are going to see my screens. Oh, no. Which ones did I just install? Need to not scroll down. Yeah, we'll either do Realms of Ancient War or we'll do Crater for worst. You do in D3, it's the whole you are a Nephilim and that makes you super cool, not as a unique event in D4. You are the Nephilim is kind of comes at the end, but yeah, it is a sort of I find it less egregious when it's at the end. Because yeah, in D4, I mean D3, you are supposedly the Nephilim, but you are kind of picked out because you are doing the quest, and it kind of comes to be the Nephilim whenever you get to about Act 5. Go find the Nephilim, because you've proven yourself. In Diablo 3, you are literally made into the one, if that makes sense. Raw was so much fun. I haven't played it. I've just seen bad reviews for it. Maybe I should go into like a definition of what I mean by the Chosen One event. Because in Diablo 1, you're... Oh, I'm forgetting his name. The son of... What's his face? Or you're one of his traveling companions. You are named characters in that. You're named characters in Diablo 2 as well, sort of. We have the daughter of Mephisto. What do we need Mephisto for? I'm being sarcastic, of course. Yeah, those are kind of what the votes are for. Good is probably going to end up being Torchlight. Because I can do Torchlight 1 in a few days. I could probably do Raw in a few days as well. Crater, I don't know. Crater, I don't know how long to beat on it. They're just notes so far. What are you guys' thoughts on the bosses, by the way? Since I should be writing review and I'm just chatting. We need to change this to a just chatting stream. Gosh darn it. I personally liked the bosses. The warrior is named Aiden. Yeah, there we go. Get a legendary every 10 to 15 rolls. Get a legendary like all the time with D4 as well. Yeah, I actually liked the final boss. I didn't like our ice ring boss. Of course, we were lacking against him every single time. Side quests were another thing that had a thing like that, where it was like a lot of them are just meh, and then you have like 1 or 2 really good ones. I liked how mad the dungeon before it was because you don't want to carry a box back and forth just to get to the good part. Yeah. Like the idea of starting with a white item with a nice base that you can D2 and then crafting rare stats on it, then layering legendary effects on top of that. Kind of like a customizable hamburger. Yes, that falls into my itemization as like useful items. I'm going to try to get into that down here. I'll write that down though. Connection lag? Connection lag was mostly my fault, my system's fault, whatever you want to call it. But yeah, right now we're actually having bitrate issues anyway. But yeah, connection lag is always going to be a complaint of mine on anything that's always online. I have lived with slow internet before, like super slow internet, into like the early and mid 2000s. So I know what it's like to say this game's just unplayable unless you have broadband. I have lived in the middle of nowhere before. I've had worse internet than this. So. But yeah, I really like the storyline bosses because, like, they had special things. Geed can show up somewhere talking about his holy rod. Like, God. Oh, I still think my favorite lines are from, I'm trying to remember his name. It's the Bird of Kuile quest. But what's one bird's ash hole from another's? Can't tell. Yeah. Namely, the storyline bosses often had unique attack patterns, environmental effects, and in some cases, even waves you had to anticipate and move around. Yeah, D4 requires internet. Yeah. There's no offline mode. Yeah, Alcor is priceless. There's a reason I made a short of his cut line. Yes, the short that I put on the channel a while back for Alcor is a cut line. You can't actually get it to show up in-game. Otherwise, I would have recorded it in-game. But yeah, I basically just wrote down my thoughts on the bosses. Namely, the storyline bosses often had unique attack patterns, environmental effects, and in some cases even waves you had to anticipate and move around, which made the battles feel more dynamic. Whereas most of the dungeon bosses often seemed to favor more just throwing heavy hits or area damage effects with no real thought to patterns or flow. Just hit harder for effect or crowd control you. Crowd control you and just hit more areas as they get more damaged. That's kind of my feel on it. I don't know if you guys encountered anything else. But yeah, I was tired of that poison guy. Oh my god, he was just repetitive. First time we had to kill him with traps because he was knocking like 2/3 of my life out per hit. But the second time and the third time we trashed him because we had upgraded our gear. We hadn't had our gear keep up with us whenever we did the first fight against him. But that was the only one we actually had pillars that we could kind of hide behind against him. The other two we couldn't. Because we had him in the ice zone, we had him in I think they were necro temples. I never spell repetitive right the first time, in case anyone's wondering. I have spell check on for a reason. Poison damage has always been the worst. The poison damage from the world boss was annoying. I think that's what killed me a few times whenever I'd like got hit by the first thing, survived it, and then died a second later. I think it was his poison damage that got me. It just ticked over instead of flowing over. Because I'd go from like full life down to almost dead. I would drop a healing potion and then I would die while it's healing up, just like snap. Even though my life had been going up right before that. Trash mobs, this includes champions, fall more in champions, and uniques. Fall more in line with the generic dungeon bosses in that they felt fairly repetitive, and if you trash mobs, this includes champions and uniques, fall more in line with the generic dungeon bosses in that they felt fairly repetitive. And if you are familiar with the Diablo 3 implementations of champions and uniques, these will feel super familiar because they're basically the same. With the same modifiers such as artillery, lasers, and walling being extremely common, though with the enemies intentionally feeling tankier, there would often be an issue when the bosses would spawn with boosted life minions that often felt like I was there chewing on wood when it comes to their minions, despite taking the boss down at normal speed. Did anyone else run into the like boosted life minions that just felt like you were just chipping away at just some giant wall despite the boss falling down in like 5 seconds? Or was that just a me thing? I want to make sure I wasn't going crazy with that. Because we ran into that quite a bit. At least for me. Because I remember several instances where I was like, how much damage is this little shit gonna take? Please tell me I wasn't the only one. Solo versus multiplayer, we might actually move that around. You know, this is how most Diablo games work, so maybe not valid criticism, but you'd like to see more hero builds available for supporting. Every hero's slice of power pie seems identical. Basically, you're wanting more support builds. You would like to see a situation... Oh, you're wanting, like, teamwork-focused combat, I think is what you're saying. You know, this is how most... So basically, you feel like the players are just too equal and just, like, everyone should just be able to solo everything, but you'd want to see players be able to support each other. There are select minions that even without modifiers have way boosted defense or health that make them seemingly 10 times tankier. Yeah. There's actually a boosted life mod on some of them. You're wanting to see more support classes, kind of like the paladin with auras, I'm guessing. Yeah, war cries have been toned down quite a bit. Enchant for sorceress and so forth. I'm gonna actually put that a note up here. Oh, at the top. That is not what I wanted. Acknowledging other players' assist skills. I like that one. That one at the very bottom. Unless you're on one of your barbs. Yeah, barbs, despite being just the big beefy boys, never felt like they caught up to the other classes at similar levels for damage. Part of you was wishing for a game that was closer to one of the Diablo 2 mods that became popular a couple of years ago instead of something looking more like... I know that a lot of people say it looks like D3. The monsters definitely do remind me of D3. The combat, weirdly enough, depending on what character I'm playing, reminds me of different games. The sorceress reminds me of... sorceress reminds me of D2. How she plays. Rogue reminds me of Lost Ark. And Barbarian reminds me of... I hated Barbarian. I don't know what else to say about that. He felt sluggish to me. He just didn't have any mobility. Even with, like, Frenzy and stuff, he just didn't feel like you were moving. Felt like I was running into the middle of stuff, taking a bunch of unnecessary damage, and then moving on. It'd be handy if he had more, like, life restore, and maybe that's an item thing. But... because, like, the rogue has a flurry thing that you can actually get, that'll hit every direction if you have the right bonuses on it. That will restore life if it's against, like, a vulnerable target. If Barbarian had more stuff like that on their skills, I think it would be feel a lot better. You like that the D4 barb is only good if they have good equipment? Thing with that is, the way equipment works in this is very much like D3, and I'm gonna be going back on that one a little bit, but it's... you're just channeling through... it's the illusion of complexity. Basically, you have all these stats, all these bonuses and stuff like that, but it really kind of just comes down to damage and defense compared to the enemies. And the way it scales is if you fall behind on gear, you're not going to damage them enough. And if you can catch up on gear, you'll go at what the designers intended for that section of the game, rather than being able to go like, oh, I'm overpowered because I have 500 attack. 500 attack doesn't mean anything. 500 attack at level 1 will be astronomically more damage than 500 attack at level 20. Regardless. Heavily aspect dependent. Yeah. Leap bar pops all over the place. I never got one that let me get that cooldown on leaps, so maybe that would have made it feel better. just cast a skill based on your weapon DPS. I'm not sure where to incorporate solo and multiplayer. So I've just been kind of writing. Let's see, beta weekend wasn't beta. There, that's the multiplayer versus solo. Everyone please hit that like button if they want. This is an experimental stream. If you guys want more review streams like this, I can do them, but I'll probably do them after streaming the game, like all the way through, rather than just, yeah. You're hoping late game hold deeper item complexity because they aren't going to change the game in the next 3 months. Yeah, I doubt that we have very much item complexity. We can do itemization instead of the class and skills if you want. A 900 plus Thorns bar build wouldn't surprise me if they did that. There's some gimmicky things as far as abilities and items go that can be used, but I don't see it being a long-term strategy. I think it's eventually going to just boil down to more defense, bigger number better, more damage, bigger number better, and that's going to be it. Whereas Diablo 2 actually had some interesting mechanics. You have Crushing Blow, which we sort of are going to have, I think, on the Druid is the one that has it. And it's got Bleed and all that other stuff and things like that. But Diablo 2 also had like modification mechanics where you were modifying your damage and your effects and all this other stuff on top of just doing more damage. And you could also twist builds to be something they're not supposed to. Whereas in D4 and D3 you just slap on whatever skills and it's just automatically whatever you have, and then you get sets to boost that. And with D4, it feels like it's going to be going kind of the same way, where it's just get bigger numbers and whatever build you do is going to be better. All these builds right now are literally just good for Act 1. Yep. That's why I'm not going to do build guides for Diablo 4 just yet. I might do some like opinions on them, but I'm not going to do build guides right now. I might not even do build guides long run. Remember in D2 launch, yeah, your old Thorns that was super OP back then, Iron Maiden. Oh, Iron Maiden from the frickin' Oblivion Knights. Don't get me started on that. They made it half effective and quarter effective in Hell and Nightmare. They're still fairly effective for various builds. Summon Man, Summon Necro with a Thorns Mercenary and Amplify Damage is exceptionally good. Thorns plus Blood Golem was so good back in the day. I missed that, but it was overpowered. You're surprised how much aspects change builds? It made some skills more viable, but I don't like the idea of items being necessary to make core skills viable. Like the penetrating shot that we used on the rogue, that is useless if you don't get the split shot. It is so mediocre, so slow, and it only hits things in a line. You're not going to be using it against crowds. You're going to be using burst shot instead until you get that penetrate effect. Graveyard of all barbs. Yep. Oh yeah, those things, those aspects changed the playstyle of a lot of my characters as well. But I kind of wish those aspects were more geared towards making impossible possible rather than making skills viable. Hey, so was I, Scott. Welcome. I was also in the stress test. I remember doing the stress test with the barb and just throwing like gems and stuff into long swords. Not long swords, two-handed swords. Yeah, Hydra's strong. Hydra we didn't even put points into. We got it from an item, and it was still doing a lot of work. We just had like 2 points into it from an item, or was it 1 point? Something like that. Had conjuration buffs. Oh yeah, Enigma. Enigma balls. Yeah, my thoughts on I should do a Diablo 2 review as well now that we've done the D2R and stuff like that. Did it fail? No. Although the fact that I put "did it fail" on the thumbnail has confused so many people with that one. There's so many people that think I'm saying it failed whenever I did that, when I was really just giving the pros and cons of the game. Good from an engagement standpoint, bad from an annoying comment standpoint. You went full lightning and you couldn't drop Hydra. Chain lightning was very handy, especially if you got the ability to let you boost damage by boosting it off of yourself. You get right up on the world boss's butt and launch it, and you just do like a joy buzzer real quick. Yeah, it's ages ago. Three conjurations with Frost Nova enchantment. Frost Novas were constantly going off. Jeez. And we're going to have a second enchantment as the sorceress whenever you get to 30. Arc Lash was amazing with the lightning ulti. Yeah. Just triggering all the stuff. There's a lot of good things in D4. I think the more I ground on it, the less impressed I was, though. I was starting to feel the repetition in the dungeons. And running around. I think I will probably go through with at least 3 characters whenever it releases, so I'll get my money's worth out of it. It's just a question of, do I want to bother with the post-game in it? You're just happy there's no set items. Dungeons and more variety, 100%. Yeah, I would like to have more variety on the bosses in the dungeons. Questions. If you could only change one thing to make D4 better, what would you choose? Itemization. That would be my first thing to change. Itemization would be my number 1 change. Level scaling would be my number 2 change. So if I only had to choose one, it would be the itemization. I item stats to be more impactful, rather than just going for high defense, high damage to be just whatever you want it to be. And because what realistically the end game is going to be, you get as high of a base item as you can, a rare, with the best numbers you can, and then you're going to re-roll its 4 stats until you get something you want. Get a generic dungeon crawl going for just friends minus the generic exploring? Possibly. You can reset dungeons. But I want items to be more impactful with their stats. I don't want to be like, I just need the highest damage weapon I can get, and then I just need to re-roll the rare mods on it until I get +% damage to whatever I'm using, -% damage to me, and whatever other mod I want. Throw 2 sockets on it, and then put whatever legendary effect I want on there. And that's my item. It makes finding items not feel rewarding. And by saying itemization, I get to also include crafting in that. Haha. Because the crafting sucks too. There's a lot of good things about it, but it just doesn't... It has a lot of like my pet peeves for crafting, which is just everything's the same and everything means nothing. Like, most of your crafting items are just garbage off the ground, or things from just destroying items you don't want. None of it is like, I found this cool looking sword, I got a bunch of gems, I got some runes, let's combine them to make like a new sword maybe that looks cool and has the stats I want, but it's a random chance. I love crafted items in D2. That's such an amazing idea that's not really ever been run with. Closest thing is Grim Dawn doing its crafted items, and even that uses some fluff to an extent, but at least that fluff has a use. In most cases. Some of the stuff in there doesn't, but there are sigils for that. You haven't really gotten to experience sigils. I didn't find any sigils. And the only thing I didn't do was the level 35 mob. Because yes, there was a high level mob on the map. It's just, it spawned, I think it had a 5 to 10 minute spawn cycle, and you had to go there and fight it specifically. That's how people were getting like 600 attack power and stuff. I just didn't care to do it. It wasn't on my list of things I wanted to do. I wanted to play Necromancer, and it just didn't give it to me. But Diablo 4 has a lot of the... They're from Nightmare Dungeons at level 50+. Okay, that makes sense. But a lot of things in Diablo 4 are, oh, click this bush. You just got a sprig of whatever the fuck. And then you combine that to make a potion. Just have an enemy drop a potion. Maybe this would be cool. Compromise the D3, D4 itemization for your gear, but D2 itemization for rings and amulets. Give you cool D2 jewelry at least. I could deal with that. I could deal with like proper crafted jewelry. Someone got a Bariza from it? Cool. The hell is this song? That's called Wait For. Okay, wait for what? But yeah, people were farming it, breaking stuff down. There's people who were playing fanatically. I don't think they slept like at all over the what? It would be Friday through Monday. Basically 72 hours. I think there were people who just didn't sleep, which is unnerving. say the least. See, you like the customization? Yeah, I like the customizing the look right off the bat. That's always nice. I like the crafting aspect, but with the potions, especially the ingredients need to drop in higher quantities. Otherwise, it's just going to be an unused feature. Or everyone's just going to use the super cheap-ass thorns and experience one constantly. Which I have a feeling is going to be what's going to happen. Because they all just give 5% XP, and then everything else is just added on to that. And I hated that we got potions that we couldn't use in the beta. I had several in my inventory. I'm putting one of my gripes in here that you can move the legendary effect off of items by destroying the item, but you can only do it once. Just as a heads up. You got 6 hours of sleep total, but you do have a sleeping disorder. Yeah. Oddly enough, my insomnia has been getting a bit better. Blizz should just embrace the black market model to bring in a ton of players. Who cares if people use D2 JSP? If they're going to bring back the black market model, and I know this is going to be controversial, I'd rather them just bring back the auction house. Have real money go through that. It's a tax hell for Blizzard, but at least that way they can build in convenience tools. If people are going to be buying stuff, might as well have the convenience tools. I personally don't want to use stuff like that. Chances are, if that existed, I might consider playing it more just to sell stuff on there, but that's just side income and I can make content from it. That said, there's still some convenient nice things about itemization, namely the limited ability to move legendary effects between items. Though use it sparingly, since once you put a legendary aspect into a new item, it will not be removable, so you can't just carry it with you to the end game unless you either find more than one or avoid using it until you have your end game gear. You don't care if it was dirty and filthy. It wasn't the thing that broke Diablo 3 for me. It was there. I mean, if I would have stuck with Diablo 3 whenever it first launched, I probably could have made decent money off of it. But it's just, there were so many other big problems with D3. What is this sleep you speak of? Something you don't get, Riz. Beating Vampire in what, 4 days, 3 days, something like that? I can go look real quick. I can be cheesy. Hopefully you don't have something on. Okay, yeah, it's not going to strike me for that. You beat it in 4 days. Mr. No Sleep. Hopefully you liked Vampire. It seemed like a pretty good game. For those of you wondering, Riss is a fellow streamer slash YouTuber who does emulation stuff, and he does a bunch of streams of just variety of games. Definitely go check him out. Subscribe to him if you enjoy a large variety of games. Mostly Metroidvanias, Souls-likes, and kind of like games most of you enjoy, judging by the polls. So go check them out. But let's see. I can just post a link to you. You might recognize the thumbnail, does it? All right, now is your afternoon time. You work late shift. Yeah, I'm looking forward to Necro and Druid. I'm looking forward to Paladin if they ever include it, which is probably going to be an expansion. I love Metroidvanias. The plans for the channel, by the way, and this is going to be way off topic. I've mentioned it in a few streams and stuff before. The plan is, yes, I'm going to keep doing Diablo 2 content. I enjoy Diablo 2. I haven't burned out on it. I've just been kind of planning around the D4 launch, seeing if I'm going to go deep into it or not. Probably not. I will still play it, and I'll still do content on the channel for it, but I'm probably not going to play it as much as I do T2. But the plan is to shift more into broad RPGs, reviews, and stuff like that. And have that be the main content, with Diablo 2 being kind of support content. Metroid Dread is great, haven't had much fun since Zero Mission. Only gripe was the bloody skulls and their homing lunges. For some reason I read that as horny lunges. I was like, oh god! I was like, I missed that part. I'm just like, ugh. I think they will, D. I think they'll do a Paladin or a Crusader. It's just like, it feels like it's going to be one of those things that they're going to include later on. It's going to be a shield bearer. I'm not sure it's going to have auras or anything like that, but it'll have like shield bash and things like that. They don't currently have a shield class. Necromancer can wear shields, but it's a... we found one, is how I know. But the Necromancer can wear shields. You think Paladin should return? I don't know whether it should be a Paladin or... As far as like personal preference, yes, Paladin. Hands down. But I don't think they're going to do that. They don't tend to favor team play skills. It's like they're afraid to make a class that has support utility. And this was true in Diablo 3. This is true of modern Blizzard North and Blizzard North in general. Or is it Blizzard South? I'm tired. The one that didn't close down would be Blizzard South. Blizzard North was the one that got shut down. I think the monk will not return. All the NPCs stole his accent. Possible to augment the base item stats more than just limited range upgrading, so you can keep up with your gear up with the pace of should be reached. They fear the Hammerden. Always the Hammerden. it'll be Pally. I mean, they went Rogue instead of Zon. Crusader has been in more with it being Diablo 3 and Immortal. I'd hope it would be Paladin. I would love an Aura class. I would like the Barbarian to have more war cries. Or at least more party base boosting war cries. More buffs for friends. But I'm trying to think what we're going to be missing. We have the Big Brute, we have the Shapeshifter, we have the Mage as like the good Mage as the kind of like power fantasy there. We have the kind of stealthy, dodgy, assassin-y character in the Rogue. Yeah, we just don't have a shield bearer. And it would be... I can't think of another power fantasy that we're really missing. The Blizzard MOBA HOTS really have leaned into individual roles for each hero when compared to other MOBAs. Seems they did the opposite with D4, making each hero good in every situation. I wouldn't say they're good in every situation. I would say they just don't cooperate. I would like cooperative. In D2, you get a feeling certain heroes are better in certain situations or for doing a particular task. I can see that. That one I can see. Yeah, like for me, the Sorcerer was better for bosses, while the Rogue was better for crowds. And the Barbarian was better for dying. I'm going to keep bashing on the Barbarian. It's not as bad as I say, but I'm going to keep bashing on him. He deserves it. Gonna get it. Yeah. They're, the only other thing from those, and I don't think it would fit into the Diablo universe, would be a steampunk class. Like, engineer. In D&D, it would be the alchemist. I mean, not the alchemist, the, forgetting the name of it. It is... I can just load it up and look. The Artificer. That's the word I was looking for. Yeah, he's squishy because he has to get in there to do his damage. The other two can stay back and do it with pretty much all of their builds except for melee rogue, which melee rogue can still pop in, unload everything, and then pop back out. Barbarian, he lands in and he's stuck there for 15 seconds. And he's taking hits that entire time. Yeah, a Tinkerer kind of class would probably be the only one we'd be missing besides a sword and board. And I think the Necromancer is going to fill a little bit of a sword and board role. I know that's kind of weird to say, but I think they're going to end up, with the way the skills interact, I think they're going to end up having a bit of a sword and board effect with some setups. Don't know if it'll be good, but it'll be there. Because I'm trying to think, you can't really do sword and board with anybody else. And I don't know if the shields are even going to have a block aspect. If they don't, then it's not going to matter. Here's what I felt about Barb. Source, even without wards, had access to a 50% damage reduction passive for a hit. Rogue with Shadow Ward got 40 that shrunk that with each hit by 1 point. Yeah, we used that a lot. That was a super popular one. I ended up ditching it for the clone, but it probably would have been better to keep it. Yeah, there's core like power fantasies. especially whenever you're limited to a specific time period kind of thing, or archetype of world. There's core power fantasies, and then most of them are branches off of those. Tinkerer would be things like your artificer. It would be things like your mechanic. It would be things like your machine summoners, things like that. You have your necromancer, which is kind of a power fantasy of the edgelord mage, which is usually like your blood, your bone, your dark magic power with a cost kind of fantasy is kind of probably the broadest topic for it. Then you have your sorcerer, which is your super brainy character, which is your brainiac, which in sci-fi is generally your kind of super techie person and stuff like that, or the person who can hack anything. In fantasy, it's more of your wizards and your mages and stuff like that. Barb had to sink a good amount of points, let alone needing to use it alongside defensive skills for 12 damage reduction for strictly melee classes. Yeah, and you didn't get a lot of the damage reduction until way later, too. It wasn't even like it was early on, like we're going to be a tank at low levels. No. I just think Barb felt bad at low levels, and that's a problem. That's just a problem in of itself. Sure, it can be strong later, but it needs to be fun starting out, too. 22 DR if you consider Fortify Life Bucket active. And you could also boost your life by, what, 15%? I think I was at max. So you could eventually be tanky, but then you wouldn't be doing any damage. Great Clockwork Golems sounds cool. The Artificer in D&D actually can do that, sort of. There's a subclass of Artificer. I can load it up real quick. The Artificer that is the Battlesmith, I think is the one. And yeah, it makes a Steel Defender, which is just a giant kind of mechanical golem. I should get back to work on doing D&D 5e Diablo. Question is, should I do it Diablo 2 or should I do it Diablo 4? Diablo 4 would actually be easier to do that with. Sadly. Very sadly. Because the skills, the way they're set up, would be a little bit easier to convert over. Yeah, 1 point in Rogue or Source, yeah. Let's see, rather than ditching it 5 levels later like you have to now. Summon the Dracolich. As far as the rest of the equipable gear, it's fairly bog standard what you expect with sockets from gems providing various bonuses. Nice feature being able to add sockets is very welcome since it can give you a bit of difficulty smoothing through the available stats, but it'll only go so far. see. As far as the rest of something, would be cool to take a page from D2's book, add a specific class skill to an item on a legendary, like imagine +1 Hydra on a barbarian. Yeah, O skills would be nice. I don't know if that's going to make it in the review, but I'm going to put it as a note on there. See, as far as the rest of the crafting, it falls into personal pet peeve, namely a bunch of useless fluff material currencies from either destroying old gear or click on bush A for berries, and those berries become something useful. Always feels super unsatisfying to me. Enigma armor with +1 teleport on there. Oh, that would be horrifying. Teleport's not as OP in D4, yeah, because it has a massive cooldown. Although I used it a lot against the world boss. Especially since you go where your mouse is, even if it's like screens away, which will be a source of cheats. Just in case anybody's wondering, yes, by the time PvP matures, there will be people playing the sorceress or sorcerer, specifically because of teleport, because it's the, well, I suppose leap attack can do it too, but because it is the skill that will literally take you as far as you can click, so they will be figuring out ways to click further than anybody else and land on top of them and then click away. Skill trees in D4 are much larger. I wouldn't really say that. Until you get to the Paragon system, there's not that much. It's not overwhelming in the least. They're arranged differently because you have to get your basic skills, which, yeah, I guess you do have more skills total. You have 5, usually about 5 or 6 for each thing so far. I don't know, you have 30, 40 skills. And you're not using them all, but I don't know. Yeah, randomized a lot of modern games tend to ignore it since it's easier to toss in random MacGuffin item that actually holds no weight on its own. And just say. I already covered the defense and damage problems up earlier. No need to rat on that one for time. Barbarian leap plus death blow? Yeah, maybe. So far, we have, as most of us know, Diablo 4 beta weekend wasn't the beta in strictest sense. There's a lot of layers that go into these tests, but the end result is usually minor modifications, rather than actually overhauling the game because it's so close to release. Introduction of Act 1, so we didn't really get that much of a view of it. For ease of consumption, it'll be broken down into categories. Of course, we already did that. Biggest negative I can give for the pickup or pass, though, is lack of offline play, since the game oftentimes feels like single-player game, only made multiplayer to take advantage of monetization, such as battle passes, rather than multiplayer to really encourage group play out of sight of maybe world bosses. And this is reflected in the character skills as well. That said, starting with gameplay, there's a few things in Diablo 4 that does quite well, and a handful that struggles with in the long term. Combat is fairly fluid, and each of the initial 3 characters feel distinct. We describe what they are. Some of the combat feels a little bit off. Dodge mechanic often felt like it was meant to have a shorter cooldown when it comes to boss design, actively sitting at 5 seconds currently, but most patterns of bosses felt like the rhythm would be better at 3 seconds. This is amplified by the weird disparity between the classes, especially against bosses, since the Barbarian, to a lesser extent the Sorcerer, would often have to reposition without dodge skills, while the Rogue would often result in skating around the field dodging most attacks in quick succession. So, mobility is a big thing. You saw people are super tanky in PvP, like 90% global damage reduction. Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me either. Big aspect of the gameplay is actually something most players are unlikely to notice until they start grinding, and I don't really start to feel it until I started to push the multiple characters to 25. That's level scaling, especially in public zones where you run across other players, as well as scaling and how it interacted with your character stats and enemy stats, which run almost counterintuitive. Simply put, as you get higher level, you need higher defense to maintain your survivability against the same mobs, scaled to your level. You need to put same in there. And you need higher damage to not feel anemic against them. Often boils down to breaking down your staff you were using leveling, or the armor you were relying on for a specific buff. Often feels weird since it results in the same problem Diablo 3 had, where bigger number better. Then we move on to when you enter a zone at level 25, the monster will be scaled to level 25 for you, regardless of where you are. There doesn't seem to be a cap, so there's just no out-leveling an area to make it easier. But if you see a level 14 in the same zone, the enemies will be scaled to them on their end, so that same monster will be level 14 to them, so all damage is simply proportional, which led to a number of situations where at low level I was killing faster than a higher level character simply because of how these two mechanics work together. This often makes leveling feel at best pointless and at worst counterproductive, outside of unlocking more skills. Simple solution, at least for story dungeons and public zones, would be to take a page from Grim Dawn and incorporate both minimum levels, which Diablo 4 already has, as well as maximum levels for public zones so the power differences feel a bit more natural and it gives incentive to level if you're struggling with the zone. Since as it stands, it has the Final Fantasy VIII effect, where leveling can actually hinder you if your gear hasn't kept up with the enemies. Your source had 97% damage reduction for PvP and said it stacks with other damage reduction abilities. Oof. Yeah, it probably is a bit wonky at low levels, but that's still a lot. By mixing these caps, you would allow players to progress through the act with higher level friends if they're having trouble, while not letting them easily power someone through optional content easily, since it would scale it as it does now. So speaking of bosses, there's definitely a number of misses with the optional dungeon bosses, but a lot of good things when it comes to the actual storyline bosses. Storyline bosses had unique attack patterns and stuff like that. The other ones just didn't. World bosses had similar to storyline bosses because of their special zones. And the poisonous guy we had in 3 dungeons. You don't mind people you actually do more damage to higher level things as a low level, which is kind of funny. They have the chart on the website, which is just really weird. You also, it's strange how it scales. But trash mobs are just kind of like Diablo 3 wrote there. Haven't done the class ones yet. We'll do those in a bit. Probably not tonight. Funny solution to an age-old problem of power leveling. I personally don't find it to be a problem. If people want to power level and be bored with that, they can. For the most part, Diablo 4 doesn't really do much of interest whenever it comes to itemization. That hasn't been done a million times. Sadly, there's a lot to be desired with how it builds up the item sets, as we mentioned earlier. If you're not keeping your attack power and defense scaling, it's going to punish you. That said, there's still some convenient nice things about itemization, namely the limited ability to move legendary effects, but you can only do it once. And you can actually do the sockets to make things a little bit nicer and kind of hold up a little bit longer if you want to. Then, as far as the rest of crafting, it falls into a personal pet peeve, namely a bunch of useless fluff material currencies floating around. And that's most of, like, the general gameplay and the itemization. The itemization's really shallow in this compared to other action RPGs. I know it's got an illusion of depth, but it's mostly just get the highest defense and attack stats and then grab whatever legendary effect you want, slap it on there, and then re-roll your rare effects. At least that'll be what it's going to be in the final thing. And there's going to be some other things that you can throw on there too. But so far, it's just like, bleh. Doesn't feel good. That's going to leave world design. And I will gripe on the Chosen One event and overall thoughts. So I think tomorrow I'll be writing the character and skills, world design, and overall thoughts. And then I'm going to, not on screen, I'm not going to do it on screen because I have to actually concentrate on it. I'll go through and clean up all this into an actual like video and do like plans for the scenes and stuff. And then I'll be the review video. Hopefully I'll have it out by Wednesday. I know I'm not going to have it out tomorrow because I've got to finish writing it. But that's a pretty good, like, first hour of these. And I've got notes from you guys down here at the bottom. Some of the things. Are there any other notes you guys would want to throw in here that I should consider to be putting in there? I've got some bug things from a few of you. View of the tree was hard to see. I'll probably incorporate that one somehow. Limitation on number of skills is a big issue. To an extent, we might see that kind of lightened up depending on what they do, because I could see some quests giving skill points, like for the actual skill tree. Look for group feature would be very nice. That one's going to probably be put on there. We've already kind of covered that with the single player thing. The don't farce us up to party up with other players to play the game. Disabling pop-ups would be an interface thing. I'm not sure I actually have that on here yet. So I'll go ahead and throw that as a note. You've been binging on the D4 retrospective vids on YouTube. For me, I'm kind of a... I know if I wanted to get the views, if I wanted to get those 140,000 or 100,000 views that like Dobrunsky and Llama get, I should just shove out a video that's like about 15-20 minutes long of me just rambling on it and just go with it. But when I go to do that, I'll write out the script just really quick. I'll read it, and as I'm actually reading it to record the audio, I'm like, no, that's not really how I feel. That was just first reaction. How I feel after sitting on it for a bit is X. And that's one reason why I actually beat Chained Echoes. Probably about a week or two before the review came out. Like that was the second time I beat it. But I had that a week or two before I released the review because I kept rewriting it and be like, no, that's not what I felt about it. I need to change that. And I'm actually really proud of that video. It's not my best video ever, but I think I gave the game a fair shake of positives and negatives. I think I gave it enough of a description that I can feel happy saying, this is how I feel about that. And I really like this one from you. That's the not enough acknowledging the other player exists skills in the game. That's one I think I'm going to be bringing up here. That's why I put it in quotes. But anyway, thank you all for participating. This is actually more people tuned into this than I thought would. So keep gaming, have fun, peace out. Tomorrow we'll be doing like normal streams. Don't worry. It'll be video games. But we might do this for the other games we've played. I might do one for not Diablo 3. For Nox. We'll see. But keep gaming, have